members of the press, my fellow Liberians. I would like to speak with you today about an issue of national security. National security, as you may very well know, entails much more than time will permit us to talk about during these remarks. National security encompasses the legitimacy of a government, the reconciliation of a people, the indiscriminate application of the rule of law, respect for human rights, and the protection of minority and vulnerable groups in the society. The impact of illiteracy, disease, inequality, and poverty on a people, as well as the personal safety of all, among other things. But today, my friends, I feel constrained to speak about terrorism, safeguarding the nation, a first step. Recent waves of terror around the world have highlighted the expanding reach of global terrorism. International terror networks have expanded and have shown that they can have an even more deadly urban reach. The United Nations Security Council on Friday, November 20th, 2015, adopted an anti-terrorism resolution. The 15-0 vote at the Security Council was followed on November 23 by an alert notice from the U.S. State Department warning its citizens to possible risk of travel due to increased terrorist threats. My fellow Liberians, the message is clear. The civilized world is engaged in a battle for its very existence. Terrorism is no longer about atrocious violence and evil in some distant land like Asia, the Americas, Europe, the Middle East, or even East Africa. It now occurs in our neighborhood within the West African region. Nearly half of all deaths caused by terrorism in 2015 occurred in the ECOWAS theater of operation, with Africa's most populous state, Nigeria, being at the front line of the battle, and Mali the latest victim. We know that terrorism is not about religious differences and should not be attributed to any religion or any one group of people. It is a crime against humanity. As we have seen, victims are of all religions, all races, all nationalities, all ethnic groups, all ages, and all socio-economic classes. No one gets a free pass. And we will all bear the burden unless we work together to ensure that we are all safe. This menace of humanity has shown that even the greatest and most powerful nations find it difficult to shield its people from the danger of an enemy who is determined to kill himself or herself, to wreak havoc in a nation and upon a people. One may therefore ask, can Liberia stop international terrorism? Probably not. We might be too small a nation and too few a people to avert evil of such enormous proportion. But we must do all we can to ensure that Liberia remains a safe haven for all. The world has become a global community as there is a free movement of people more than ever before, especially in such regional groups as ECOWAS. Liberia has to move from being reactive to being proactive, because it has not happened here before does not mean it will not happen. I recall being awakened on the morning of April 12, 1980, by my younger brother, who unceremoniously entered the bedroom where my wife and I slept to announce that there had been a military coup d'etat. As educated as I may have been at the time, the phrase coup d'etat was not a part of my active vocabulary. For the life of me, I could not figure out what the young man was talking about. In December 1989, when the government announced that a military incursion was taking place in Nimba, many laughed it off as just another ploy of the government. Then there came the Ebola virus. It took the loss of a few thousand lives before some accepted the fact that the deadly disease was real. In all three of those cases, and many more, the government and the people of Liberia were taken by surprise. No one contemplated the occurrence of any of those incidents, and consequently, there was no plan to prevent what happened. Neither the nation nor the people were prepared to absorb the shocks in ways that could have minimized the devastating impact of each of those historical events. So what must we do? There are short to medium-term measures that should be implemented by the government, and there are long-term measures. There are things that Liberia must do alone, and there are things that we will be able to do only in collaboration with regional member states. There are yet things for which we would have to solicit the cooperation and assistance of the international community. My fellow Liberians, Liberty Party therefore proposes the following measures for government's consideration in our effort to help keep our country safe. Things that Liberia must do alone. There are quite a few things I listed. I'll read a few, and the press will disseminate the rest. 1. There should be an absolute ban on the issuance of airport visas, as airport visas reduce, if not eliminate, any possibility of vetting those who are admitted into the country. Except in extreme and absolutely necessary cases, no one entering Liberia on a visitor's visa should have his or her stay extended beyond the original period granted. But even if it becomes necessary for the stay of a visitor to be extended, the decision to extend should not be made by the Bureau of Immigration and Nationalization alone, or any other single agency of government, but by a committee consisting of representatives of each of the agencies that make up the joint security. A person entering Liberia on a visitor's visa should not be allowed to adjust his or her status to that of a resident. The requirement that a person applying for a visa to enter Liberia must provide the name of a host with a verifiable address and telephone number. And unless the host is self-employed, the address and telephone number of the employer of the visitor's host should be carefully enforced. Anyone intending to work in Liberia should be allowed admission into the country only if he or she is in possession of a resident visa. Of course, all legal requirements, such as the local employer applying firstly to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for a resident visa and the issuance of a labor clearance by the Ministry of Labor as a condition precedent to the granting of a resident visa must be complied with. The capacity of consular sections of Liberian missions abroad should be enhanced to ensure thorough vetting and a screening of visa applicants. Religious leaders, Christians, Muslims, and traditional should begin informative and education programs teaching that no true religion supports violence and that no one should encourage, assist, or acquiesce in terrorist activities, regardless of the reason or motive. Things that Liberia should do in collaboration with Mano River Union States, Cote d'Ivoire, Guinea, and Sierra Leone. Being cognizant of the fact that Liberia's borders are porous and that the colonial lines that demarcated our various countries separated one group of relatives from the other on both sides of the border lines, the government should initiate discussions with governments of neighboring states on the following issues, among other things. 1, conduct joint education awareness programs for residents of border communities about terrorism, how to protect themselves, their neighbors, and those in neighboring countries by alerting their local officials of the presence of strangers within their communities and the crossing of borders by someone who does not live within their own communities. Increase border patrol on each side of the borders, with security officers having the authority to meet regularly and share reports and intelligence information. The governments should commit to monitoring habitual criminals and ex-convicts even after they have served their sentences. With emphasis on anti-terrorism activities, the strategy for cross-border security within the Mano River Union should be pursued within the framework of the 15th Protocol to the MRU Declaration on Cooperation on Defense, Security, Internal Affairs, and Foreign Affairs. The protocol, among other things, called for the establishment of structure, systems, and mechanisms to facilitate information gathering and analysis on security issues, dissemination of appropriate security information to stakeholders with a view to ensuring common understanding and appreciation of developments on the security front, monitoring of borders, holding of appropriate meetings to understand and address security issues and concerns, and providing the atmosphere for confidence building within and among communities, especially along the borders. Ultimately, our objective should be to make national and sub-regional security the business and responsibility of all citizens so as to prevent terrorism within our sub-region. Things that Liberia may do in collaboration with ECOWAS, member states, and the international community. The President of Liberia may want to take the lead in calling for the full and effective implementation of the political declaration on a common position against terrorism of ECOWAS, which includes a counter-terrorism strategy and implementation plan. The strategy is inspired by the United Nations Global Counter-Terrorism Strategy to provide comprehensive steps that states must take individually and collectively to address the threat of terrorism. The strategy requires member states to undertake a wide range of activities for preventing terrorism, such as ratifying and effectively implementing the relevant legal regimes, eliminating conditions conducive to the spread of terrorism, enhancing early warning and operational intelligence, preventing extremism and radicalization, and promoting democratic practices and the protection of human rights. The strategy also requires member states to investigate, intercept, and disrupt terrorist planning, networks, and activities, and cut off terrorist funding and access to equipment, finances, and training, among others. Some of the major features of the strategy are in ECOWAS Counter-Terrorism Coordination Unit, an ECOWAS arrest warrant, and ECOWAS blacklist of terrorists and criminal networks. If operationalized, the ECOWAS arrest warrant, for example, will strengthen cross-border cooperation among law enforcement agencies and eliminate safe havens for terrorists and other criminals. We must be prepared to confront the threat of terrorism head-on and instantaneously. Our military and police approach must be agile and adaptive. We therefore call for the creation of a regional strike force. Strike meaning swift, tactical reaction in known environments. Such a force will be regionally trained but deployed in each member state so that the advanced local unit will be able to react within meanings of any threat, such as an active shooter or an improvised explosive device situation, with regional backup within a few hours. My fellow Liberians, safeguarding our nation and its people against terrorism require us to be proactive, preventive, and prepared. What Liberty Party considers the 3 P's of the fight against terrorism. We must each be touched by the better angels of our nature. Together, we must overcome the challenge, seize the opportunity to win tomorrow for our children and our grandchildren. May God bless the people of Liberia and save our nation. Thank you.
Prime 105.5 FM, a station with a heart. Keep the dial fixed. Don't tune off. Lock 105.5 on your FM dial. Keep rolling with your tasty dial, the home of exceptional programming, great music, quality discourse, fresh and authentic news and information with awesome and talented presenters. Prime 105.5 FM, your tasty radio.